It's right up my street, it's my boulevard. It's right up my Straza, oh my God. It's garden right up there, ah, it's right up my podcast.
Ooh. Welcome to episode 10 of Right Up My Podcast. My name's Kate White.
And my name's Gwen Watson.
And this is the podcast where we talk about all sorts of things that make you feel good.
Yay! Make you feel amazing.
How are you, Gwen?
I'm all right, thank you very much. Can I just say, it is so nice to be back. And also, it has been so nice to get your feedback. People loved the laughter episode. People have been lolzing all across the globe to that one.
We got some brilliant messages that people sent us of them and their housemates or them and their families just sat around laughing. It was brilliant. It just brought such a big smile to our face to hear. And actually, we often get really lovely messages from people after episodes, but we got a really particularly nice email this episode, didn't we? From a lovely lady called Magda, who lives in Switzerland.
Yes, a Polish woman living in Switzerland who said, I'm so glad you guys are back, as I was a little sad when I didn't see any new episodes come up this year. Oh, Magda.
Thanks, Magda.
She said, the laughing one was so good, I found myself going to the bathroom and testing out my laughter and decided to give this a go on a more regular basis. Brackets. Ha 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 ha.
Brilliant. It's so brilliant.
I love it. And talking of people doing clips as well, can I play a little bit of this?
It's so infectious. I love that.
So infectious. That is from Thelma and Phil, Hopsy and Howie. Thank you so much for sending that to us. That put a big smile on our faces. Loads of laughter spreading across the land. Love it.
Brilliant. So, Gwen, other than laughing along with clips that random people have sent us in, what else have you been doing to make yourself feel good since we last chatted?
I honestly don't know. Kate, can you go first? What have you been doing to make yourself feel good?
Well, I checked out that show on Netflix, Lupin.
Ah, Lupin.
The French, how do you describe it? You've watched it, right? I think it was your recommendation.
I've watched it. I loved it. Is the second half out yet? Or is it still just the first half?
I've started from the very beginning, so I haven't even got far enough to clock whether the second half is out yet. But one thing that happened was when we watched the first episode, Netflix just automatically put the dubbed over English language version on, which was so shit. No. It was awful. We got to the end of it, we're like, this is cheesy, man. This is not good. I was like, no, got to stick at it. Got to stick at it. So we watched the second one and we worked out how to turn the dubbing off and just watched it in French subtitles. It transformed it suddenly. It was brilliant.
I mean, we are voiceover artists and we do have friends who are professional dubbers, but even so, I cannot watch dubbing. I am all for watching it in the original language with the subtitles, and Lupin is so good. It's that guy, I can't remember his name, Omar Sy, that's him. He was in that film, The Untouchables, where he plays the guy who helps the other guy in the wheelchair. Yeah. And he is his help. And he is so sexy. I don't want to reduce him to that. I mean, he's a very talented actor.
Just objectifying him. Look, he's a person with hopes and fears and dreams like the rest of us.
He probably went to the French equivalent of RADA. But let me tell you, he is very easy on the eye.
His ass is fine.
But it's good, isn't it? He's like
it's really good.
He's like a criminal, but like a mastermind. What do they call that? A kind of master of disguises.
Yeah, he's always 2 or 3 steps ahead of the authorities. He's always thought police. Of the next, exactly. And it's really stylised, isn't it? It's done in a really stylistic way, and it feels quite kind of cool, a little bit funny, a bit sort of tongue-in-cheek. Yeah, it is a good watch. I enjoyed it.
It's great. And of course, it's French, which is great. We just love a bit of French, don't we?
Mais oui.
Nous sommes les francophiles.
But I'm telling you what, I'm quite glad that we're about to come out of lockdown because I've nearly exhausted my tolerance of sitting on the sofa watching Netflix. I feel like I need to bring something else into my life. I've nearly reached my end of that.
Oh, you're ready for the change. Well, I tell you what I've been watching. I have ended up in that bloody situation where you accidentally end up with Prime again, and you just order something, you're like, how have they got me again? So I went on there and I found there's this, I don't know if I was talking about this last episode, but basically there's a TV show that's all about being matched up with your one soulmate across the world. It's called Soulmates. Oh. And you do a test and it matches you with your one person across the world. And of course, this leads to all manner of problems because people who are in established relationships have been for 20 years, father of their children. They're like, let me just try this test. Oh, sorry, dolls, you're not my actual match. So that's quite good. It's called Soulmates on Amazon Prime. But then at the same time, through some trickery in the world, there's this series called The One on Netflix. And it's exactly the same premise, except for people are matched via DNA. And you have this one match from somewhere else in the world. But it's so good. There's like so many twists and turns, and there's like murders and deception and all of this stuff going on. And also relationships and the kind of issues and problems that roll out in relationships when one of the partners does a test. But it's really good. And me and my friends who all WhatsApp each other, we were all gripped. It's one of those where you're trying to go to bed and you're like, I'm just going to watch half an episode more. So I haven't watched telly like that for a while. So yeah, The One on Netflix, really good.
So I know that is dramatised, it's fictional, but do you believe in that? Do you believe that there is one soulmate for everybody?
No, not at all. No, I think there are many.
No, do I how? Bullshit.
Yeah, there are many at any one time.
Yeah. I believe that kind of on a biological evolutionary level, we're maybe attracted to different types of people because there's more likelihood of us spawning with them. But yeah, other than that, no.
Apparently we can tell by smelling them if they've got the right, if we've got the
sweet musk.
It's like our antibodies and things. If we've got matching ones that complement theirs so we can reproduce the right healthy kids.
Oh, are you a scientist?
Yes.
I love it.
Just trying to work out. Having said there are many soulmates around the world, none in Pembrokeshire.
Maybe you're just not smelling hard enough. Maybe you're attracted to the wrong type of musk.
Yeah. Must stop sniffing in the wrong places. God damn it.
It's right up my podcast.
So what is this week's episode, Kate?
So this week we are talking about walking therapy. We really wanted to carry on exploring some of the amazing benefits of being in the great outdoors, didn't we? And we particularly were interested in walking and walking therapy. And so we go and talk to a very interesting man called Jonathan Hoben. So Jonathan is an integrative psychotherapist, and he's currently based between London and the Isle of Wight. And over the past 10 years, he specialised in the fields of addiction, trauma, anxiety disorders and depression and a bit of anger management. But we're talking to him specifically today, as I was saying, about walking therapy because he pioneered this approach to counselling and to talk therapy. And he wrote a book about it called Walk with Your Wolf, which is a really interesting read. I have read it and I would definitely recommend it. I wouldn't say that if I didn't mean it. And then part of this book involves a series of practical exercises that you can do when you're out walking on your own. And Gwen and I will go on and talk about that further on in the episode. Mm-hmm. But he's been featured by the likes of the BBC, the Daily Telegraph, countless other national papers and magazines. And now, right on my podcast.
Of course, and top of the list, right up my podcast. The pinnacle of his career, shall we say.
Yeah. We started our groundbreaking interview with Jonathan to ask him the all-important question, what is walking therapy?
Well, walking therapy's got two sides to it because there's the walking therapy that I do as a therapist with clients. There's the walking therapy that we do on our own. For me, I found the benefits of, let's say, walking therapy was actually just walking in nature and walking in very green spaces. For me, it was Wimbledon Park. There was a wonderful lake. I would go there in the morning. Even if I just sat by the lake, I'd have a coffee. I'd then kind of have an elongated walk through Wimbledon Common, Richmond Park. You know, I know research says that if you walk for 20 minutes, you'll be feeling the benefits of walking. But for me, it takes me about 30 minutes to shut off my thoughts from the day before I actually start processing thoughts and feelings, start thinking creatively and start switching off. So After 30 minutes for me, then it becomes healing. It's kind of like when you go on a holiday, right? And you're there for a week, and it takes you about a week to actually start having a holiday. It really does.
So true.
Yeah, you're so busy before going away. There's so much to organise.
Absolutely.
Takes you days to actually breathe, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And that's the same for me. So after 30 minutes, walking therapy really does begin. And in my book, I then started creating all these exercises, mindful exercises that you could do whilst walking. Walking therapy for me, though, in a psychotherapeutic and in counselling context, is I walk with clients outside in nature. They walk, I walk. They talk, I listen. It just completely takes away the pressure of sitting in an indoor therapy room. Clients relax, and by relaxing, they feel a lot more safe. They open up a lot more about their feelings because they feel more safe and more relaxed. And there's something very holding about nature. It's a neutral space. It's not a room that belongs to you. It's not a room that belongs to me. It's something that is very neutral and something that we both share. And I think there is just something very comforting and very holding and very supportive about natural landscapes and our natural surroundings. And that's what walking therapy is in a nutshell.
There's something also about walking next to somebody and not having to look into their face, isn't
definitely.
there?
Yeah.
Rather than sitting, like you're saying, sitting opposite a desk or, with chairs facing each other.
Too intense.
Yeah, there's something very freeing about being next to each other and just looking at the sky, for example.
It's incredibly confrontational. Actually, studies show with men, especially, it's even more confrontational. It's that animal thing, isn't it? It's why I wrote my book, Walk with the Wolf. It's the animal part that we cerebrally don't. We always cerebrally have to think our way out of things. I think we give our cerebral brain a huge amount of credit, but not so much the animal brain. But the animal brain is the growling part that would just sit there going, "Arr," if someone's just sitting there looking at me.
Sussing each other up, weighing up the danger.
What it is, if you've got anxiety and you're sitting there and I'm just looking at you, it's like, wow, that's going to just make me feel a lot more under the microscope, and I'm more likely to shut down or go into the freeze, fight or flight mechanisms. So again, when you don't have to look at the therapist, it's non-confrontational, and you start what's called free associating. So our mind starts to wander, as it were.
So we're talking about two different things here, really. So one of your branches is walking therapy, literally delivering therapy sessions with a person in person, out and about. But what we're focusing on today is what people can do for themselves, and that is the therapeutic benefits of actually going out for a walk. So that is also something, that's what you write about as well?
Well, I do. In terms of, for me, if I go for a walk, I started developing exercises for sort of the reader to actually learn from. So, for instance, how we can be more mindful, how we can just notice the elements around us, how we can strike up a relationship with them, how we can notice the power they have over us. I think if we have anxiety, for instance, it can isolate our thoughts and feelings when we go for a walk as well. For instance, I like choosing some walks that have this great sort of either epic landscape, or you can go to the end of a pier or to the top of a hill. And you suddenly, when you're at that top of the hill, at the end of the pier, you suddenly look back at the shore or look over the city of London if you're there, or wherever you are, or if you're top of the mountain in Wales, And all of a sudden, those thoughts that we have and the feelings that we have that can make us feel very insular inside, which can increase anxiety and depression, suddenly kind of dispel somewhat. And we have this sudden, sense of perspective when we're in these types of locations. And it just takes the weight away from our problems. So in that respect, that's just a very quick one thing that I do regularly. I try and find these spaces where I can go to that give me that perspective, because it then puts everything else that I might be worrying about into context. It reconnects me with life and diminishes any other problem that has just I've made bigger or seems bigger than it really should be.
So the environment that we're walking through is important. It's you're talking about going to these places that sort of have a feeling of awe around them. So as compared to walking around the block, there's a difference there as far as the therapeutic benefits.
Totally. They all do different things. Forest bathing is very good for anxiety because...
Hello, Tick and Tick.
Done that.
Yes.
You'll know, series 1, episode 3, I think, forest bathing. You'll have listened to that, Jonathan. You'll know that well. Yes, carry on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what actually happens with that is I noticed, before the forest bathing thing came out, I noticed, of course, in Wimbledon Common, there's these wonderful walks through these, through trees. But what I noticed is I did feel, if someone who felt quite anxious, I did feel a lot more relaxed. So basically, the way that the light filters through these trees, it dims the light, and that creates oxytocin in our brain. And oxytocin decreases the stress hormone cortisol, which is what actually fuels anxiety, fuels depression. And if we're kind of working very hard in our busy lifestyle, this stress hormone is built up within our bodies all the time. I mean, I wrote in my book that I think London, for a very long period of time, has been addicted to their own adrenaline. And the things like social media and all of these types of things that, you know, we're so used to in life, and, you know, not taking breaks at work, and, you know, just the really bad habits we've got into and really bad routines has increased cortisol. So for me, you know, when you do forest bathing, we do notice by the end of the walk, we feel a lot less stressed and a lot better, a lot less anxious. But there, if we're depressed, we will keep ourselves locked in our homes. We will duvet dive. We're used to being cloaked in something. So if you suffer from depression and you go into the woods, it's within your comfort zone. It keeps you oppressed. But if I took someone with depression out into a very open landscape, they would go, oh my God, it would move them out of their comfort zone. Okay. They would feel a bit more anxious, but in a good way, because it's slowly pushing them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, and is it something to do with the sort of setting allowing your eyes to relax to a longer horizon?
I think it's about, for me, it's absolutely that. When you look out and there's more space, your imagination can roam more, I feel. Yeah. For me, it just gives me a lot more headspace. It really does. And I think for burnout as well, these wide open spaces when we could really feel that we're in nature. Mm-hmm. When you're in burnout, again, you go into this tunnel vision of stress and your world becomes very narrow. You know, you lose perspective. And as I said, you know, so we lose perspective of the things that we used to love doing. They fall to the wayside. We don't spend time with loved ones. We don't maybe spend time with our kids. So by walking into these areas, we get that perspective back. And that perspective, I feel, is often brought back into our lives as well. It gives us that clarity and that ability to reflect on where we've gone off track, perhaps.
Yeah.
Now, we have often said this on the podcast that Kate and I are quite privileged, really. I'm in West Wales. I've got beaches, I've got moorland, I've got mountains, I can walk for miles and straight out my back door. And Kate also, almost as good as me, she has the downs, she has the woods.
I live in Bristol, in the centre of Bristol. So lots of green spaces, a small city that you can easily get out of the city into nature without too much of a stress.
So there's going to be people who are listening who maybe don't have access to mountains and beaches and massive open wide spaces. Is there still enough benefit in pounding the streets, in walking, in the physical act of walking? Are you still going to get these benefits?
In London, I loved walking down historical streets, loved it. Because it was a way that I started to time travel. I think in Shoreditch especially, you had all these wonderful signs at the side of factories. You had Borough Market. And even if you went into that old, you know, Jack the Ripper territory down as a Whitechapel, was it? Around there. It does kind of make you wonder, like, how people used to live. And also the thing is, like, there was some beautiful buildings, architecture, churches. There are things we can walk past every single day and not notice. So I think, number one, I like choosing somewhere sometimes that's quite historical. Soho was another place I absolutely loved, simply because there's just so much to see. But I think there's something about going down where you know, if you plan where there's a little bit of history, cobbled streets and whatever, I do think it's like a different type of meditation, that it just completely takes us away from anything that we might be stressed on. And the more we focus on something, the bigger it gets, you know. It's like the kind of the bogeyman in the cupboard. So by actually kind of walking, you know, having your mind taken off what your problem might be and focusing on these other things, again, by thinking the way that people used to live, again, it can give you a sense of perspective, because at the end of the day, it's the same problem, but in a different century.
I wanted to ask you a bit more about a word you just talked about, burnout. And this is something that you do a lot of work in, isn't it? Not
just burnout for adults, burnout for teenagers as well. And teenagers are a really They're really hidden at the minute. There's been spoken about a little bit, but also where burnout's concerned, we never really talk about teenage burnout, do we? Because burnout is something that just happens in the adult world. How ridiculous is that? So burnout is adrenal fatigue. It's when we burn out our adrenal glands, okay? Right. So that's what it is. So in lockdown, of course, what's happening is, I think the beginning of lockdown was almost... people had the time with their families. They were able to use their time in a certain way and find it quite useful. But then again, the boundaries that let's say the bad habits they got in their usual working environment before the pandemic slowly crept back in. So all of a sudden, when people would have spent time on the train looking at their phones and never switching off, now they don't have to travel, so they're starting work earlier. And they're finishing work later. And with homeschooling, it's just there's more auditory stimulation, retinal stimulation. Basically, when we look at the screen, people are calling it Zoom fatigue. Actually, what it is, it's retinal overstimulation. So if we sit our kids in front of a TV day in and day out, they're going to get overstimulated, aren't they? Yeah? If you've got constant sound in your ears, you're going to get auditory overstimulation. Mm-hmm. Both of these things increase adrenaline. Yeah. All the time, pumping. And also we have that fear as well.
I think we're all doing such admirable jobs of just coping, of just keep getting up and keep going every day. And every now and then it just crashes in and you're just like, this is mental. This is mental. Yeah. I cannot believe this is happening.
No, of course. I mean, this is the most surreal, most unbelievably difficult situation all of us have been in. There have been so many people dying, and I think talking about grief and talking about death and talking about a lot of things in our life changing, a lot of things in our life, a lot of endings happening as well. The ending of marriages, the ending of maybe your job. There's the beginning of a new transition happening somewhere. But with up until now, we've not had really any clear guidance as to when that is going to be. So the one thing that we can do in our daily life, this is where walking has been so good. You can design that time in your day to go for a walk. Nature is consistent in what it does. We had winter, we now have spring. And I think if we have that relationship with nature, it does almost give us that kind of the statement that it's going to be okay. Life is going to go on because, of course, life does go on. But with burnout, it's a cortisol war. Our cortisol increases. Our adrenaline is released massively on a daily basis. And we need to do things to reduce that. And walking is one of the best things for that. And also, if we're sitting down on a daily basis and we're not moving our bodies, our body is under stress. Like any animal locked in a cage, not moving, it's under stress.
So if people want to incorporate it into their daily routine, because I know for me, I spend a lot of time at my desk, and sometimes you'll get to the end of the day and you're like, shit, that's another day I've not been outside. So is there an optimal time for walking? Like, is it a thing that is best done first thing in the morning as soon as you wake up, or is it just as, to set you up for the day, or is it something that you could do at the end of the day when the kids are in bed and you've done everything you need to do and go out for a nighttime walk? Is there a best time for our bodies and minds?
That's a great question. It's a great question. It is. It's a really good question. It's something that I've thought more and more about, I think, since lockdown, because I've loved my twilight walks. I've loved my evening walks. Yeah. Absolutely. Through the first lockdown, second lockdown, that my twilight and evening walks, my God, were they powerful. Yeah. They really were. Because again, at twilight, that dimming of light creates more oxytocin. And also, it's I think it's that way we come out of the day. We've had the day, we've been through the stresses and the strains. So I think as the day sort of ends and closes, we sort of wind down with it. There's that sort of mirror parallel process that we have. But also at night, it's a huge amounts of oxytocin in the brain is produced. And I do find it also sort of walking, sort of as it's getting dark, my imagination and creativity sparks up even more so.
Yes.
It's a blank canvas, isn't it? And
yes.
And the stars and the moonlight, it's all very soothing. It really is. Yeah, quite magical as well.
Take a break, come outside, let's walk for a little while. Kill the screen, come bathe in green, the dappled light will make you smile. Pull on your shoes, let's take a wander, come and gaze a bit on the wild blue yonder. You'll be feeling better with every single mile. You know that it makes sense, a walk will do you good. Just take a little strolling, and you'll be feeling better before you know it. With a friend or by yourself, a ride on Shank's pony, so good for your health. You just go walking, you'll get high on endorphins, and you just try walking for yourself.
And you talk in your book as well about walking is a really effective way while you're walking of confronting difficult emotions, even if you're on your own, as opposed to talking with a therapist. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
A lot of our feelings, because of our busy lifestyles or because an issue is quite difficult, we have an ego defense mechanism that's there to protect us from painful feelings and painful emotions, or stressful feelings and stressful emotions. What we do is we push it in our inner attic in our brain. So when we actually start walking, after 30 minutes of just getting into the rhythm of walking, that attic door is opened and these emotions start coming out one at a time. So I call it refiling. So it's basically, we've got a thing called emotional backlog where we store a lot of our feelings. And walking allows us the time to actually, for the feelings to go, he's on his own, she's on her own. And they start creeping out. Now's our time. That's what happens. If we create a feeling of safety, our emotions will start rising to the surface. It's that thing of feeling relaxed, feeling calm, feeling grounded. And so, when these feelings come up, they come up very organically. When we walk, because of the neurochemicals that are produced, endorphins, that's kind of increases our strategy, the problem-solving part of our brain. Our brain seems to process emotions far more successfully. But basically, it means that subconsciously we can process our feelings a lot more deeply. And if anything's very traumatic, or if we've experienced anything that's traumatic, the pandemic actually being quite traumatic on a level as well, it helps us to process these traumatic feelings far more gently, far more successfully, rather than someone sitting opposite you going, tell me about your feeling. We're able to process it in our own time, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. There's no time limit. And just it allows the brain to do what the brain does organically and naturally without us really interfering with it too much.
Do you know, I've been really processing stuff, like you said, organically over these last few months. And it's because of the lack of distraction. It's the lack of the social calendar, because usually mine's pretty packed and you're like, OK, I'm out this and this night and I need to factor in staying in on this night. Or, there's usually just so much more going on. So at the moment, because I've been spending more time alone and more time still than I have done for my entire life. And I've been processing grief from 15 years ago that I hadn't realised I'd properly processed, and really having that opportunity to sit with it. I think that's what it is, isn't it? It's taking away all the distractions. It's taking away your kids demanding you, or your laptop pinging at you, or et cetera, et cetera. And it's just, I really like the way you describe that once you just take all that away and you're just by yourself, that your body does what it's designed to do, and it will, your brain will start processing that stuff and bringing up the things that you need to look at. It
does. It starts that's why I called it refiling, because it's like once you've dealt with one file, it does the next one and the next one and the next one, and it almost goes back in a kind of almost in a timeline. Yes. The brain's it's an amazing thing. And I think, as you said, when we stop, we can sit with our feelings, quite literally sit with our feelings. We have so many successful ways of deflecting from our feelings. The brain's really quite clever and can be wonderfully manipulative, So, sitting with your feelings, of course, when we walk, we can sit with our feelings, but there is just something so comforting. And that spiritual aspect, I mean, for me, when I went through some real adversity, the loss of my mother at 17, brother at 22, had major addiction with both cocaine and alcohol, and coming out of all of that was like coming out of a really bad tornado. And for me, walking, I felt very alone, completely on my own, and I'd kind of literally made my world so small and insular for myself. When I started walking, I started naming the trees. I mean, I thought, am I going mad here? But I did make these connections with nature, and it did start feeling, every single day I built that relationship, and it felt more familial and familiar. And because of that, I did feel it became like this support network. So when these feelings did come up, it just supported and comforted that process so much more. And by doing that, I think it encouraged more emotions to come up, as it does.
Well, I was just going to say that you talking about that kind of the support network of nature, and it just makes me think about something you said earlier about the consistency in nature, which really resonated with me, because this time last year, sort of ish, we were just at the beginning of the first lockdown, and I remember being out a lot, seeing the daffodils and the tulips and all that sort of stuff. And now 12 months on, suddenly seeing these daffodils come up again. And I'm finding a kind of strange comfort in it. Like, the daffodils don't care about the pandemic. They're still going to do their springtime thing. And that really makes a lot of sense to me, actually, that the sort of the comfort in that annual cycle that we see in nature and our place within it.
And it survives, it adapts. It teaches us to adapt. We have to adapt, you know. It's like, and life goes on. And also, I mean, with clients as well, the great thing about walking therapy, if treatment goes over a year, it's wonderful to say to clients, can you remember where you were last year? Can you remember where you were 2 years ago, 3 years ago? It's a great marker for all of us. It really, really is. But also it evokes so many memories. Daffodils, for me, you were mentioning daffodils. I had exactly the same thing. It brings back being, gardens are so important, aren't they? And I feel so blessed to have had a garden growing up as a kid. And just looking around, I remember seeing, my dad growing beans and the smell of, the tomato plants and looking at daffodils and all of that. So, again, there's something very comforting that it really takes us back in time, doesn't it, to a place of that association of comfort, of love, of security, of safety. Yeah. It really does. And so many memories attached to it as well.
Yeah, and spring has sprung, yo. Like, I can see blue sky at the moment, and my goodness, does life feel different right now.
Right.
Yes, much easier for getting out and walking. This is a good time for this episode to land. Now, you mentioned earlier about walking mindfully, which sparked my interest. I went to a mindful session with my mum a few years ago, and she made us go outside. The lady made us go outside into the garden and walk mindfully, which is something I'd never considered doing. And this is literally where we were really aware of every footstep on the grass, every blade of grass under our toes, the temperature, the texture, the etc. So yeah, part of it is walking and being really lost in your thoughts, but is part of it really bringing your focus to where your feet are going, for example?
Yes and no. I absolutely. I mean, I do one of the exercises in the book, which is actually going off the beaten track. So I do things like when we slow down and we notice that we make a concerted effort to actually slow down. I think as we slow down, we are naturally sort of drawn to our feet moving slower and where we're kind of placing our feet. I think for me, as simple as actually in the summertime, you take your shoes off and put your feet on the grass. I'm still getting over one of your podcasts where you're both in welly. You take your wellies off and you're both in the mud, squelching around.
Yeah. Grounding.
I still haven't got over that. I've never once done that. It sounded fantastic.
Highly recommended.
So satisfying.
I would say when it's warm, it's warm. I love just having my feet on the grass. There's something incredibly grounding about that.
Yeah, really
the smell of grass, the sense of grass. I think when I walk mindfully, for me, it's just slow down, slow down, slow down. When we slow down, we take in so much more. When we're rushing, walking fast, our brain is walking fast is really good for channeling out things like anger and stress. We're taking one negative energy and we're turning it into something really quite positive. But I think if we want to be mindful, we do have to change the pace, really, really slow it down. And by that, I think it changes our core balance as well. So I do think with that, we become more mindful of where we're walking, where we're stepping, that contact with our feet on the ground, but also what we see. One of my exercises is to tell people, do a route that you've done year after year after year after year. Now walk really slowly. Take a pen and paper and notice things that you've never seen before. And you will come back with about 20 things going, wow, I never saw that before, ever.
Yeah.
You start seeing and hearing things completely differently.
Yes.
Far out, man.
One thing that you've mentioned when we had a chat earlier, and that comes up in a few of the episodes that we've done that involve interacting with nature, is doing it in the cold, as in walking in the cold. So obviously you're not, you're wrapped up safe, health and safety, kids, but the power of the cold to be really beneficial from a health perspective.
It's like freshwater swimming. I called it a cold weather cocktail. Cold weather cocktail.
So enticing.
Is there vodka involved?
While I say this to my clients, do you fancy a cocktail? They go, excuse me? It's like a cold weather cocktail. A cold weather cocktail. Yeah, so it's similar effect as freshwater swimming, which you've done a podcast on as well, haven't you?
Which we do a lot of, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So
well done, Jonathan, for doing your research.
I have, absolutely. So it's endorphins are released much more in the brain. Dopamine, a lot more. We also have, again, oxytocin. We have the vitamin D from the lux levels that we have. I think in the wintertime, in the rain, my two daughters, from a very young age, I said, we're having a shower. The rain's hitting their face. And they walk and they take their hoods off. They do. They don't get colds and all of that. They love the rain hitting their face. They love the cold on their face. It makes you feel alive. It makes you feel connected to the elements. It reminds us that we are here. We are here. Because sometimes we can feel like we're going through our daily basis, but we don't feel available within ourselves, do we? We just sort of feel like a ghost just sort of floating around our life going, oh. And we come back after a walk and it's like, I'm back. I'm here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Interesting. And that's how I always feel after cold water swimming, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You're instantly like, and we're back.
Reset.
Yeah, exactly.
And I definitely felt a bit of that sort of ghost-like existence over the last couple of months when we've been in lockdown, being around the house too much, not having enough variety in the day, not enough physical movement in the day. I've definitely had that sensation of sort of being present but not present.
Oh, for me, I've created a model called energy management. And again, it's all about energy. Walking in the cold, I come back, it gives me energy. It's energizing, not de-energizing.
Yeah.
I look to things in my life, what gives me energy, what takes energy away. Again, these are concepts of, when I walk, I think about today I feel tired, so I'm not going to do a big steep hill because if my adrenaline is if I'm slightly fatigued and my adrenaline, I burnt my adrenal glands out a little bit more. If I'm a big gym bunny or if I'm used to going on these big hilly walks, if I do that, it's going to require me to burn even more adrenaline, which is going to deplete my adrenal glands even more. So it's actually going to have an adverse effect. It's going to burn me out. So if you're feeling quite burnt out as well, you've just got to be aware of just slowing it down, taking it easy. And again, just having a much more nurturing, calmer walk. And again, if you're in the cold, if you're quite burnt out, I would say for a shorter period of time as well, because it is going to require your adrenaline to shoot a little bit more. Okay, so I think right now that's what's happening. I think a lot of people are we're struggling to find out what energizes us. We're in an environment right now where there's a huge amount of unmet needs, and we need to have that time in our life to make better choices, to have that time to think about what's the next best thing that I need to be able to do. But to be able to do that, you have to be able to create that time in your life to be able to go through that thought process. If you don't allow yourself that time, as I said, all you're going to do is you're going to continue firefighting and make very rash, very quick decisions that are going to be probably not that beneficial to yourself or anyone else around you.
Thank you so much to Jonathan for taking the time to talk with us today. That was a really interesting chat. And if you want to find out any more about Jonathan and the work that he does, you can go to his website, which is jonathanhoben.com. He's also got a really active Instagram page, which is at Jonathan_Hoben. And he's starting to do weekly Insta Lives for 30 minutes where he answers everybody's questions to do with mental health, with a particular focus on coming out of lockdown and the kind of the unique challenges that brings with it as well. So head over to Instagram and see what he's doing there. And of course, his book, Walk With Your Wolf, his groundbreaking book all about walking therapy, available from all good bookstores.
Now, as per usual, we always like to try these things out. And thankfully, in the back of Jonathan's book, he has some handy, simple exercises with notes and questions and instructions that you can follow. So we decided to follow one of those. It's called Our First Walk.
Can I just say, before we continue, we should probably say to the listener, if they can hear the sounds of people squawking in the background and birdsong, it's because Gwen and I are both out in the woods right now, traipsing around, looking like crazies with our mics out.
We thought we'd do this as live, so we're actually in the woods as we speak. All right, back to Jonathan's exercise, and just so you know, we'll include this exercise in our show notes so you can do it yourself. Right, so he says, this is our first walk together and I want to keep it simple and manageable. Check the weather, choose your route, turn off your phone. Before you set off, just take 5 minutes to check in with how you're feeling, both in general, for example, stressed, anxious, tired, fraught, frazzled, and about the walk specifically. You don't need to say what you hope to get out of it. It's the journey that counts, not the destination. Use your walking diary or the space below to jot down your feelings. Should we say now how we felt? How did you feel before your walk?
Yeah. So I was a bit headachy. I had a kind of low rumbling headache that wouldn't go away. And I was feeling kind of low-level frazzle, I think. A lot of things to be done. Wasn't sure if I could fit them all in the day. So I was just feeling headachy, frazzly. How about you? How are you feeling?
God, that sounds bloody awful. I was feeling, I just had a low-level stress. I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of stuff I had to achieve. I was feeling a bit anxious. A text from a friend had kind of set me on edge a little. And
Jingle jangle.
Jingle jangle was making my brain race a little bit. And I was really tired. So,
We're just a pair of joyful people, aren't we? Blimey.
That's just my morning. It's just how I feel. Good start to the day.
That was all before 9 a.m.
So we obviously wrote all that down. And then he says, for the purposes of this particular exercise, it's vital that you keep a slow and steady pace. And at the same time, try to walk purposefully, even if you're not feeling in such good emotional shape. Head up, shoulders back, like you're taking back at least some of the power you've been giving away so freely.
I really like that. And actually, on kind of actively thinking about my posture and the whole shoulders back, head up, it feels good. It feels good to stand like that and walk like that.
That's great, because I totally missed that bit in the instructions. So
yeah, we all hunched over, knuckles grazing on the floor.
My usual stooped over position. So I'm glad that worked for you. All right, he says, for the moment, I'm not asking you to mull over your problems and scramble for solutions. First, you must establish good walking practice and learn how to be mindful of your surroundings. This is the key, isn't it?
Yeah, this was kind of core to this exercise.
Yes. Don't consciously push unpleasant thoughts away. Instead, let them in and allow them to pass while refocusing on what you're seeing and hearing in the present. Keep a good pace and be observant. Look at your environment with new eyes. This was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, really was. And that point about not kind of pushing thoughts away, just acknowledging them and moving past them. I know different things resonate with different people, but that I find that really helpful to be like, I see you, negative thought in the corner, but I'm just not going to give you any power.
Yeah, not going to dwell on it. So on your walk, he said to consider how many trees or birds you can name, if it's cold, wet, warm, windy, etc., and how these elements make you feel, what you notice that you haven't noticed previously if you walked this route before, the most intriguing aspects of this environment if you haven't been here before, how it feels not to be overstimulated by your phone constantly pinging and bleeping. This is going to be a large part of my feedback. What the relative silence around you feels like if you're in deep greenery, and how you respond to the noisier surroundings if you are in an urban or suburban environment. There's more of that, about more instructions about kind of taking time to slow down or speed up and etc., etc. But let's get on with it. So how was your experience walking? Well, I want to call it walking mindfully, but walking consciously.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is, isn't it? The first one, how many trees can you recognise? That made me chuckle because, I'm not going to lie to you, little city girl here, could not recognise a single one. And also with the birds, I was like, yep, brown bird. Oh, yep, there's another brown bird.
Oh my God, I was exactly the same. I was like, that's a rhododendron bush. Oh, is that a rhododendron bush as well? No, that looks different. Oh, I don't know what any of these things are.
No, big tree, small tree, middle-sized tree. That was basically my input for that one. Every now and then I definitely got sort of twitching fingers wanting to reach for my phone, just in case I'd missed something ground-shattering that desperately needed my attention, which clearly I hadn't, and it didn't. To start with, the start of the walk, I did get a lot of pleasure out of just focusing on the surroundings because I was kind of acutely thinking about the things he told us to think about. I was really like looking at the trees and being like, oh, look at that, the green of that moss, and oh, look at the lovely markings on that bark.
Aww.
And then after a while, my mind did begin to wander after about 10-15 minutes, and it began to kind of wander back to work, wander a bit back to the kind of to-do list. When it did that, it did feel a bit clearer and a bit more creative. It didn't feel like a stressful wandering of the mind. It felt like quite a kind of calm wandering of the mind. But then, there's another but then.
Aha.
After I'd got through this whole processing the work things that came to mind, they began to trickle away to the outskirts. And my mind began to wander more into the sort of feeling excited about plans for the future, or things that I want to do now that lockdown's ending and the weather's getting good, and I want to go camping, wouldn't it be fun to go kind of bivouac, or just kind of excited, hopeful things began to filter into the top of my brain.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was really nice. It felt really good, actually. And I was thinking about something that Jonathan said, that for him personally, he's got to walk, for kind of a good 20 minutes just to get past all of those more acute stresses, to let them rise up and then disappear before he gets to the next level of things.
Yes, that is exactly what he said, wasn't it? Like being on holiday, it takes the first couple of days to get your brain into relax mode.
Definitely. And how about you? Did you get past the moment of twitching, wanting your phone? Did you get past thinking about the to-do list?
Yes. Well, my attachment to my phone was horrendous, and I, even for the first 10 minutes of the walk, I kept like stopping and just thinking, I just need to message that person about this, and blah blah blah. So in the end, I put it firmly in my rucksack, so I couldn't access it easily. But I did keep thinking those thoughts of, I'll just message that person. I'll just do this. It made me really aware of how often my brain goes to my phone, which is awful.
Did that kind of get less as you walked, or did it pretty much stay there front of mind for the whole walk?
No, that definitely got less. It definitely did ease off. And like you, I was looking at the trees, and it's funny actually, because I'd done this walk just once before. My sister had taken me on this walk a couple of weeks ago. It's like a good hour and a half, and so I was trying to kind of retrace our steps and trying to work out where we'd been. But I realised I was noticing so much more this time, because when I was walking with her, we were chatting, we were talking the whole way along. And this time, when it was just me, and I realised walking by myself, I just noticed a lot more, because I was really paying attention to everything around me. And I was like, oh my God, this bit of the walk is really beautiful. And this bit of the walk is, I was really noticing the bird song, because I know he was making us pay attention to birds and the trees. And so I noticed that when the birds were deeper in the woods, they were really, their bird song was really echoey. And for some reason also, I just started, like you said, once I'd worked through my to-do list and was then just wandering, I was really, I was taken back to when I was a child. Like I was finding a lot of memories were coming up. And which was really interesting. And I think maybe because, I spent a lot of time outside when I was a kid. And like he was saying about him having a garden when he grew up, we had loads of land, and because we lived in, West Wales. And so we were always mucking around in the fields and the woods and the streams. And so I was really, I was just really thinking about my childhood, which was, really lovely. Yeah, there were like all these crows, and where I grew up, we grew up with loads of trees with loads of crows in, and I was suddenly really... I'd read recently that crows are super intelligent, and I was like trying to I was like, hello crows, like I was really feeling I was
talking
out there,
to the crows.
Yeah, and communing with nature.
You're the only ones that understand me, crows.
Do you recognise me, crows? I know that you recognise people. And like he said, I found like it was a little bit like meditation, that my mind would start wandering, and I would be holding on to thoughts, and then I think, oh no, I've got to focus on my surroundings, listen to the birds, and look at the trees. So a few times I felt like I was readjusting my mind, like you would do in a meditation session.
One thing I felt after doing the walk was that, like I said before, I felt like I had too much to do and too much to fit into the day at the start of the day, and I didn't really have time to go for a walk. But actually, after I'd been for this walk, I felt quite empowered, kind of along the lines of, yes, I didn't have time to do this, but I actively chose to sod it. I'm going to do it anyway. And that felt really good feeling, like I could easily have just sat at my desk ploughing on with things.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I don't have time to do this thing that's purely for my own benefit, but I'm going to do it anyway and sod the rest of you. That feels quite good to make that decision.
Yes, because walking does take up time, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I was out for the best part of an hour by the time I got back home again.
Yeah. So it's quite a time investment to do it properly, isn't it?
But then I did feel better set up for the day. So even though it would have been very easy to be like, no, I don't have time to do that, actually, after doing it and coming home, I felt better able to crack on with all the other things that I felt like I needed to do. I was in a better headspace for it.
Yeah.
So it was worth it. It's worth just doing it.
I did really have that feeling, which I know I've done a few, like nearly every episode we've ever done, but I did have that feeling of, why don't I do this all the time? And
I know.
And this is making me feel so good, because I was really feeling as well, I walked about 13,000 steps yesterday, and seeing as I average about 2,000 a day during my week, it was quite a lot, and I was just like, my body felt engaged, and my body felt, it was really good to feel active and to feel my muscles being used, and just think, God, if I did this often, I would be so much fitter than I am.
I was the same. I just thought, actually, I would love to start every day just getting up and going for a walk, whether that's round the harbour side, whether that's across the fields, whether that's through the wood. It doesn't matter. I mean, this isn't specific to any location, is it? It's just the act of going out for a certain amount of time and doing that walk. And I have such a love-hate relationship with all sorts of different forms of exercise. But if I could just get up and do this every day, I think that would be great.
So you've already answered this question, but I've got to ask you anyway. So would you do it again, Kate?
Absolutely, definitely. I'm going to try and do it. I'm going to try and do it almost every day. There, I've put it out there. It's in the universe.
Oh my goodness.
I am.
Wow.
It really, it's just something about being outside works for me. And now that we're getting longer days, we've got more light, more daylight hours in the morning, more daylight in the evenings, it's going to be easier to fit this around our days.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, definitely. I know I've realised I've said this before, like about the forest bathing. I'm definitely going to go walking in the woods all the time, which I have done a bit. But I think just more the, definitely. I'm definitely going to make more of an effort to be mindful and present when I'm out walking, to just not have my phone in my hand, and to just be paying attention to the surroundings around me, and to go walking more. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's not overcomplicate it. It's a pretty simple premise. It's just, put down your phone and focus on what you're doing. Be intentional in the way you walk.
Yeah, cut out the distractions and just be present and really connected with the environment around you, and let whatever comes up come up.
Thank you for listening to Write Up My Podcast.
As always, you can email us at writeupmypodcast@gmail.com. We always love hearing your feedback, your thoughts, your musings, your ideas, so get in touch. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at writeupmy.
Don't forget to follow or subscribe to us wherever you listen to us. And if you are on Apple, please do take a moment to go across and to rate and review our podcast, because that will make us look good.
And you can also visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/writeupmy. patreon.com/Write Up My Podcast, where you will find all sorts of exclusive content. Ooh, we look forward to seeing you there.
Additional chat from Gwen and Kate, and all for the price of a coffee. What more could you possibly want?
A massive thank you to our team of highly talented people who support us.
That is Andy Turvey on the editing, Andrew Grimes on the music, Cash O'Bweel, our content editor, and Erica Francis George, who does all our artwork.
And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with our next episode, where we will be discussing therapeutic sound.
Ooh.
Thank you for listening, and in the meantime, keep doing things
to make you feel good. Bye-bye.
Tell me, did you like the podcast, Brian?
No!
Oh. If, unlike Brian, you thought our podcast was really great, then don't hold back. Like, subscribe, and tell your mate. But if, like Brian, you thought our podcast wasn't fun, then just keep quiet. Don't feel the need to tell anyone. We'd love to hear from you if you've got some thoughts to share. Such rich and lovely views that all should be aware of. But I hope you liked our podcast and you thought it was really great. And if you did, like, subscribe, and tell your mate. 'Cause we don't need grumpy pants bringing everybody down. No, we don't need negative Nellies making people frown. No. So I hope you liked our podcast and you thought it was really great. And if you did, like, subscribe, and tell your mate.